One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Have I got a special treat for you today? I love sharing student success stories, and today's episode is all about the first year of podcasting for one of the students of Profit Podcasting, and I am just so thrilled to share with you Brittany's story. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Brittany in a second, but I just got to let you know that I am so proud of her. I am just in awe of her tenacity, especially podcasting through 2020, whenever everyone basically had a pass, right? Like if there was a pass for you to say, you know what, I don't think I'm going to figure out my podcast this year. There's too much going on. I just don't know that everything's going to work out in my favor, or I have other things that I have to figure out in my business. Brittany looked at 2020 and said, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to move forward with the plan that I have. And I just can't wait for you to hear the rest of her story. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? So I wanted to tell you a little bit more about Brittany and some of the incredible things that she's up to. So Brittany Bennion is a branding photographer and strategist, and she's the host of the Posed for Success podcast. I know, it's an awesome name, and we actually talk about the name of her podcast in today's episode. I can't wait for you to hear that story because it's really fun. But Brittany helps creatives gain the visibility they need to stand out in their field and attract their ideal clients. Brittany's superpower is to help women feel comfortable in their own skin in front of the camera. And we'll get into some of the things that you really need to go check out that Brittany has done so well, but I'm going to go ahead and mention it here. Y'all, her Instagram, like, you have to go follow her. You have to go see the things that she's doing on Instagram, because not only is she sharing pictures of herself and how her own branding works, but she shares pictures of her clients all the time. And there are so many times where I look at a picture and I just think, oh my gosh, I want to work with that person, but I don't live in Michigan. So that's where Brittany does a lot of her local photo shoots. But other than that, her brand strategy is just so incredible. I listen to her podcast and I learned so many things for my own website and how I can improve my own branding. So that's all I'm going to share. I'm just going to get into the interview. Here it is, my conversation with Brittany. All right, Profit Podcast listeners, I'm so excited to introduce you to Brittany. Welcome to the show, Brittany. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Oh, thanks, Crystal. And I am so excited to be here too.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I got to tell you a quick story. Brittany is one of the OGs of Profit Podcasting. She was, let me see, I think it was probably the second or third time I launched the course. And I was just like, so impressed. I got to brag on you for just a second, because I loved how you got in the course and you were just like, I want to have a podcast. I want to make this happen. And here we are. Like, we are here a year later. So I have all the questions about what your first year like was as a podcaster, but just tell everyone real fast, like, what did it feel like to launch your show, to say I'm actually a podcaster?
Well, it was so incredibly exciting. But I think that also, like, I had that feeling like, who am I to launch a podcast? And you start to be like, well, is this right for me? What am I going to do? But once I had like really said, I want to launch a podcast, I'm going to do this, I'm going to commit to it, I was like, let's go ahead and do this. And I knew, I was like, because I want to do this and because I know that this is right for my business and for myself, I want some help. So I'm not fishing around in the land of Google for hours and hours and hours and then never having any results to show for it. So when I did finally launch it, it was like, oh my gosh, I have really done this and I'm committed. And it was so, so exciting, so rewarding.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm just like, I'm such a bad interviewer. Here I am. I was so excited to hear your answer, but I didn't even ask you, Brittany, can you tell, because I know you, we know each other,
Right.
and I just totally skipped over. Tell us a little bit about what your business is and what your podcast is about.
Great. Yeah. So my podcast is the Post for Success podcast. I am a brand photographer and brand strategist. And so I help women entrepreneurs with their visuals online to build their brand so that they feel confident in front of the camera, that they can show up for their business and their brand online, and so that they connect with their ideal clients. And it's funny because my background is in photography. And so a lot of people said, well, a photographer, why in the world would you ever start a podcast? Like, you should be doing something that's visual, not something that's, auditory. But I was like, nope, a podcast is really where I want to go. And I have been so blown away by the success and how well people are able to still learn what I have to say. And it really does translate easily across all platforms, including podcasting. But so that's what I do. It's been so exciting. Like you said, I've been at it now for a year. I'm coming up right on my year mark, which if you would have asked me a year ago, if I would have thought that I was here, no, for sure. I would not be like, oh yeah, I've had a podcast for a year. This is great. So it is really fun and it's exciting.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have to tell you, like, there's, here we are, we're at a brand new year, and there's a lot of people listening that are still probably thinking, should I do a podcast? Just like you, like maybe they have a visual business and they're like, I just don't know if it's going to translate really well. Maybe I should do a YouTube video, or maybe I should do blog posts, because then I can share all my pictures. So what was that? Like, what did that decision look like? Was it, this is how you express yourself better? Or was it just, I listened to podcasts, therefore I know how to do it? Like, I feel like I could do it. Like, what was that? What was that thought process like?
Right. So like photographers, when you see photographer or branding, it leans so heavily towards blogs and writing and websites, and I could just never get myself to actually sit down and just write and write and write at a computer every single week. And I was like, this is just not something that works for me and my personality. And honestly, the people who I'm trying to speak to are business women, and none of them have time to sit down at a computer for hours and hours every single week reading things. They are like, we are busy, we're on the go, we need to be doing stuff. And I was like, a podcast is where they're going to be able to consume the information the best. And a podcast is going to be where I know that I can create the best. So that's where I landed on podcasting. And so where it didn't seem like it actually would fit from like the onset, like when you're looking, you're like, why would you do a podcast? But it's ended up being such a good thing for me and my business. I've been able to create far more this year because of the podcast, and grow my audience, grow my business, all directly related to podcasting. And at the same time, not feel burnt out by doing something that I just don't like to do, which is sitting and like writing out a blog post. Now, that being said, I learned this trick from you, and I will forever and ever. I know when I tell you what it is, I don't know if I've told you this before. You'll be like, Brittany, you're so ridiculous. But I like will forever be grateful for this trick. But you had taught me in the course that instead of like sitting down and writing every single word that you want to say, that I could get into a Google Docs and use the voice to text, and then it writes out for me. And it was like so relieving. I was like, this is wonderful, because I can talk for hours. And I can just go on and on and on and on about a subject. And then if I do it in this way, it typed it all out for me. So then I basically just had to edit something already. I already had it recorded. It was just like this magical system that you had opened my eyes up to, that made it so much easier for me to create content everywhere, and all of it stemming from the podcast.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much, because that's exactly how I felt when it came to like my online journey began with me blogging and writing. And I'm like, it was like that death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a blogger. No, like I just kept going. I'm going to do this because it's what people do. People that have online businesses, they have blogs and they write. And it's like, no, you're going to sit down at this desk and write no matter how painful it is. And then I found, first of all, the voice typing, like you said, changed my life. Oh my gosh. I love that you shared that, because we actually haven't talked about that on the podcast in a while. Like that is an absolute game changer. But also, like, I'm so glad to hear that you didn't just force yourself to keep blogging and then sit down every week and say, oh my gosh, like I have to do this again, because you lose that creativity and you lose the ability to just express yourself. And y'all, I've listened to and learned so much from your podcast. I've learned so much about how to put images on your website, how to do, what was it? There was one that it was about branding, or like the certain pictures that you want to have in certain places on sales pages and on your website. And I was just like, this is so stinking good. So I just, again, I'm going to brag on you and on your podcast. Like it's so good, but I don't think that same message would have translated the same if I just read it on a blog post, because I felt your energy. I felt your passion whenever you were describing, like, y'all, you need to get this. Like, you need to understand this. This is important. And if I were to just read a sentence that said, this is important, I would think, oh, she probably thinks it's important. But no, you hear Brittany say, this is important. And you're like, okay, I'm paying attention. So I think that you do that so well in communicating with your audience and really teaching and educating your audience. But I want to switch gears for a second because I have to just be really upfront and honest. Brittany is like a super like big audacious goals. And she told me in a conversation that we had last year, I said, well, how many episodes do you have planned out? Like going into January, she's getting ready to launch. I honestly, y'all, I thought she was going to say, I have 3 to 5. Is that good to? No, she said, I have 1 year of content ready to go. And I was like, okay. Like, what? So tell me, how did that plan work out for you? What did that plan look like? Did you pivot? Did you switch? What? Tell us all the things.
Oh yeah. So it was this whole thing happened because same thing. For me to think about planning out anything beyond like a week's worth of content was so overwhelming. And it all happened right after we met in person. We were in California together and I was in the airport on my way back home. And I had, I don't even know if I had a layover, if I was just waiting for my flight. And I was listening to the course. And I just sat there at the airport for, I don't know, maybe an hour. And I just let every single thing from what you had told me on it. And you have like this amazing little content template. And it just looked so doable. And I just like, I'm going to open my brain. I'm going to think of every single thing that I know. I'm going to write it all down. And by that time, when I plugged it in, I was like, oh my gosh, I literally have a year's worth of stuff that I could talk about right now without even like really investing a ton of time. It was 1 hour of just like brain dump, brainstorming, getting it all down. And I reference that every single time that I am preparing to do a podcast. Now, this was before I ever launched the podcast. So things have changed a little bit, but the core content that I wrote just from that one time over a year ago, I am pulling from that all the time. Things that I've learned since then. 2020 happened and it threw all of us for a loop. So for sure, there were some things that I had to tweak and I felt like there were definitely topics that were way more relevant that I needed to insert in at that time. But I felt like I had the flexibility to do that because I already knew that I had like this back end of so many other things that I could speak to. The other thing was that I wrote down is like, I wrote down some like scary things on the podcast. Like I am going to interview X, Y, and Z. These are some big names that I just think would be so cool to have on the podcast. And never even thinking, I was like, I'm just going to do it. It's going to be okay. And sure enough, Crystal, I have interviewed and had on the podcast every single one of those people that I wrote down.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm such a proud mama right now. I'm like, you're doing it. You're doing so like, and that's so key. That's so good. And that's actually something that I don't talk about a lot, but I'm totally in the world of like manifesting and vision boards and like doing all that stuff. And I mean, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, y'all, that sounds a little woo-woo. I'm telling you that stuff is incredible. And I love that you shared that even though you didn't use all of your ideas, or maybe the ideas looked a little bit different, the way you felt about your podcast, like not having that stress of, what am I going to talk about this week? What am I going to talk about? I think going back to the creativity, you're able to just let flow happen. And you're like, well, I can change things around. I can move things in my content calendar because you have the freedom to do so. So, oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I couldn't believe when you told me you planned a year's worth of content. I was like, my first honestly gut reaction is, did she do it right? Like, did I explain it correctly? But then like to hear that part of the story of you just opened up your brain and just let it flow. That's so incredible.
Right. Because there's nothing like getting stuck by saying, oh my gosh, I'm stuck. I have a podcast that I want to have released on this day and I have no idea what to write about, or I have no idea what to podcast about. So, and I think that that's where I got stuck so many times. It's like, I just need a prompt. I just need to have like a topic or a subject or, what am I going to talk about on this episode? And then everything else was super easy because of the podcasting format. If I were to have done that and be like, now I've got to type up, 300-400 words on it or 1,000 words or 3,000 words, I probably would have poked out my eyes. The thing that that I've learned about it too, as you're talking about this, is that it's about consistency, not perfection. And that's what I love about podcasting as a platform, is that I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to flub my words and I'm not going to say things right. And that's okay, because like you said, you feel somebody's energy, you get to know them, you like feel like you're like girlfriends sitting in the car together, just having a conversation. And that's okay. And that's what helped me, because so many times, like for me, I know for myself, and I know for the women that I work with in business, you get stuck with this like, oh, it's got to be perfect. Oh, I got to do it right. And I love that I don't feel that way with podcasting. I can make mistakes and I can be me and I can be real, and it connects with my audience as long as I'm being consistent.
I love it. Oh my gosh. I think that somebody really needed to hear that, because that is absolutely the message that I live by with my podcast as well. So I'd love to hear that that is who you choose to be, because I'm sure that there's someone listening in your audience that is maybe thinking, like looking at you like, oh my gosh, I want to do what Brittany does, or I'd love to have a podcast too. So it's almost like the gift that keeps on giving when you show up just as yourself, and we show the unpolished versions of like, oh, I messed up, but I'm just going to keep going anyway. It's a gift.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gift that you give someone, because it allows them to embrace their imperfections and keep going as well. But I want to go back to what you said. So tell me what your editing looks like now versus what it looked like when you first started. Did you over edit yourself? Have you learned things? Like, tell me all the things about that part.
I have learned so much. So let me backtrack a little bit. So I was never afraid of editing, only because I have prior experience with editing through, like, I went to university for journalism. I used to do radio and things like that. That doesn't mean that I knew how to podcast or that I was perfect at it. Okay. So don't think that that's like a leg up in any way, shape, or form. But I was comfortable with editing, the editing aspect. I was so comfortable, in fact, that it took me like 3 hours to edit my first episode. And because I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get every single out of here. I got to make sure that this sounds great. If this, maybe I should shorten this pause. Oh, I took a weird breath, or I was breathing real funny here. So I was like, this is going to be great. I'm going to edit it. It's going to take me 3 hours. And that's the process in the very beginning. And now my process is literally 5 minutes. And it comes from practice. Like, I know my cadence. I know what it's like when I'm talking just to myself and a podcast mic. I feel comfortable, like we said, being imperfect. I don't care if I say I'm just talking. And I also say a lot less. I also have had to just embrace that maybe I don't like the sound of my voice, and that's okay, because you really can't edit that one too much. Or that whether or not it's like I have a funny breath in between, if I breathe funny, or if I have like a nasal, like nitpicking it doesn't do me any good, because that's not what people are taking away. They're taking away like this information that I'm providing to them through the podcast. And so anyways, yes, from beginning, I was like, I'm going to do this perfectly. And it took me a bajillion hours to edit an episode. And now I feel just as confident, if not even more confident, releasing an episode with editing in like 5 minutes tops. And I love it.
Oh my gosh. So how long did you go with like really, really like deep dive editing that took hours and hours? And then when did you just say, okay, like this is enough? How long into podcasting did that transition happen?
It didn't take too long. I mean, Mama doesn't have a lot of time. So spending 3 hours to edit was just like, that's a luxury that I just don't have anymore. So, so I would say like maybe like the first 5-ish episodes, I was like, we're going to deep dive and do it. And then it cut down. It was like, maybe it took me like 20 minutes to do it. And now I can do it pretty quickly. I would say, honestly, the thing that really bothered me the most was that I chose to purchase I didn't use your recommendation for mics from your podcast course. So like slap on the wrist. But later on, I went back to it was like, Crystal, you got to help me with the mic situation. Once I switched to my new mic, you can totally tell a difference from my first episodes now to my episodes I'm recording right now. And I loved it. And that really made the difference for me in switching the time that it took for me to edit, because I was like, the audio sounds a whole lot better. I don't have to try and mix or do weird things to try and make the audio sound good. It's the same thing in photography. Okay. People say for photographers, get it right in camera so that you don't have to fix it in post. And the same thing goes for podcasting. Get it right as you're recording it the first time so that you don't have to sit on hours in the back end trying to fix it.
Well, I already know people are going to be asking, what is the microphone that you use now, so we can link to it if anybody's curious.
Yeah. So it's not anything that's amazing. The difference for me, and I'll explain this. So the difference for me was we talked about a condenser mic and a dynamic mic. And so many people are saying, get condenser mics. I know we hear all the time, like when you hear like, oh, you're going to start a podcast, you need to go get a Yeti. And I'm not dissing Yeti. I hear wonderful podcasts record on the Yeti. But for me, I don't have access to a podcasting area or space. I live in an apartment that has 5 children in it. So really, it's quite noisy at any given moment, day or night. Okay. So what we had talked about is getting a dynamic mic. So I switched to a dynamic mic, which I am not an expert, but just to briefly like recap it, a condenser mic kind of picks up noise from all around. So if you're like somebody who moves your head around a lot, it will still capture really great sound for you. For me, a condenser mic also captured all of my children's lovely noises and screams, and the space that I was recording in was quite echoey. So it caught my echo a lot. When I switched to a dynamic mic, which really is like, you think about mics that singers use when they've got like, they look like they're eating the microphone, then, and it just catches the sound that comes straight directly into it. I didn't have to worry as much about the space that I was in. And also didn't have to worry about like, if my kids were outside of my door, like saying, mommy, I need a drink or something, it wouldn't catch it or pick it up. So I really felt a lot more comfortable with it. So you can tell the difference, but I switched from a condenser mic to a dynamic mic. I got this one off of Amazon. It's a Samsung, I think. It's like $150 mic. So not a huge investment, but really, really made a difference in the quality of my podcast. So if you have
Oh my God.
anything, like if you have any extra money, that's where you should spend it. Get yourself a good mic.
And I love that you said, I'm gonna quote you on that part. It's like, if you spend the money in your equipment up front, make it right whenever you shoot it, you record it the first time, then you don't have to spend hours editing to fix all the things that happened in the first go round. So I love that perspective. I totally agree with that. I think it'll make your life a lot easier. So I kind of preempted. Hang on. I have a question for you that I want to end on in a second, but now I really want to transition into your audience. So what type of connection did you have with your audience before your podcast? And now how has that changed since you've been podcasting for a year?
Yeah. My connection with my audience was all next to nothing. I was sporadic at best. I was doing a lot of one-on-one work, and I was able to get that information by word of mouth, by family and friends, by doing like local networks and meetups. But I decided to transition a lot of my work online. And once I did that, I knew that I had to show up consistently online. And what I was doing before was not consistent. It wasn't growing in the way I wanted to. I would like throw up a Facebook post or an Instagram post every now and then. My email network and all of that was same, sporadic at best. Okay. But my entire business formula I have built around my podcast and how I show up to my audience. And It's super simple. And how I started this was one of our joint mentors, Amy Porterfield, came out with a podcast and said, these are 10 different ways you can repurpose a podcast. And once I heard that episode, my brain like exploded and I was like, oh my gosh, and that was really what I was like, I really, really need to do this. So since then, my podcast is the cornerstone of my business. I make sure to do a podcast every single week without fail. I have never missed a single week, even when we're sick, even when there's Corona, even when we're on vacation. I have podcasted. I've recorded a podcast in my car. I've recorded a podcast under a pile of blankets. I have recorded a podcast in the middle of the night or really, really early in the morning, like hiding in my basement before my kids wake up. Whatever it takes. I have not missed a single week of releasing. Now, that's just me. That's what I decided, and that's the promise I made for myself. But from there, I also convert it into a blog post, and that's just a little longer form of my show notes plus visuals added, because I do reference visuals a lot in my podcast, and I just tell people I direct them from my podcast to the blog. There you can see the visuals. There you can get downloads. There you can get freebies, everything like that. Which boosts my SEO on my website. So it's a direct link to that. And then I break out weekly for all of my social media posts. If I'm showing up live on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, it all stems from parts of the podcast that I've broken up. So like I said, everything. And I do a weekly newsletter based on the podcast every single week. So like I said, cornerstone of my business, everything stems from the podcast. Everything to create is a million times easier because I have a direction, I have a focus, I have a system. And because of that, I mean, I have grown exponentially. I have, let's see. I've probably 5x'd my email list this year because of it. And doubled my social media following, all sorts of things that I can just say that really is all stemming because I decided to just do a podcast. And it's really simple. It sounds like a lot, but it's really simple when you break it down.
Oh my gosh. Like I am just bursting with joy and pride and all the podcasting feels because like this is my dream for podcasters. Like it truly is. And I love that you shared so much of the back end, like the ups and the downs. And you're like, yeah, I had to do it in my basement. I had to do it in the middle of the night and I had to do it here. But being consistent, your audience knows that you're going to be there. Like Brittany is going to come out with something awesome for us, even if it's, something totally different because she had to pivot because it's COVID or if it's something crazy, like all the kids are at home, like you have still gone so strong. And I'm so proud of you, friend. And I am just so grateful to have you as part of our podcasting community. I think that people can learn so much from you about all your branding. And we're going to talk about that in a second, because I know you have some fun things that are coming up in store that I want you to talk about. But I want to end with one quick question about what is your biggest goal going into year 2 of your podcast? Like if we were just to shoot for the stars, what's your biggest goal for 2021?
My biggest goal for my podcast, well, besides just continuing to be consistent, I'm excited. I'm almost to the 100 episode mark. And I'm like, who even does that, right? A podcaster does that. That's who does that.
I love it.
So I'm excited for that. My biggest goal is I would love to get to 10,000 downloads of the podcast. I'm not there yet, but I am really well on my way to getting there. That would be super, super exciting to hit that on my podcast in 2021. So I'm excited for that. But it really, like I said, I am grateful to be part of your community because you made the threshold to starting a podcast so easy. It was really attainable for me instead of having, oh my gosh, there's another thing I have to learn and it's going to stress me out and all that stuff. You were so personable. Like I said, I would ask you questions. I'm like, Crystal, what's wrong with my mic? Why is this not working? Or help me with this. And you were able to answer all my questions in a very unintimidating way. I never felt stupid saying like, help me out. And that was part of my success, right? Having the community. I loved getting into the Facebook group and asking a question. You were the one who named my podcast. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. I do. And I wasn't going to say it because I didn't want to steal your thunder, but I totally did. I totally named your podcast.
Yeah. Crystal named my podcast because I had come up with all of these, like I was just in my brain in my own industry and I couldn't get away from the jargon that I wanted to use. And you're like, Brittany, nobody's going to want to listen to a podcast named that. I was like, okay. And you said, what about Posed for Success, which is such a great play on words. Because that's really what I'm doing is I'm really positioning somebody to be successful in their business by way of how they are visual in their images. I mean, I don't know where you get this stuff. It was so fantastic. But yeah, you totally named my podcast. And I can't tell you how many compliments I get. They're like, Posed for Success. That's so cute. And that totally makes sense. And I'm like, cannot take any credit for it. Zero whatsoever.
I love it so much. I love it so much. And it's funny because it was one of those like lightning bolt moments. Like when it came to me, I'm like, okay, Poised for Success. And I was like, what about Posed for Success? Honestly, I don't know where it came from. It just hit me and I threw it to you. Like we're just pitching and catching ideas. And I'm so glad that you caught that one. Anybody listening, if you are in the online space, if you have your own business, you must go check out Posed for Success because it is so, so good. But we're going to dive into a few things that Brittany has coming up that I'm so excited to share with you. But I do have 3 final questions that I want to ask you. They're my rapid fire questions that I ask everybody. So are you up for it?
I am 100%.
Okay. So first and foremost, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
Ooh, recovering perfectionist. Yeah.
Recovering perfectionist. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Okay. My next one is who is a dream podcast guest that you would love to have on your show? And what is the dream podcast you would love to be on?
My dream podcast guest would be Jenna Kutcher. Awesome. I love her podcast and I feel like we would connect on the photographer to business transformation. It would be, I would totally like keel over and die. Maybe I need to write that on my 2021 goals because, girl makes it happen.
Yes.
And who would I love to be? Yours right here. Aww. I would love to be on your podcast. So I'm really excited. I'm very flattered that you would have me be a guest here.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. This has been so much fun. Okay, my last question is, what parting words of wisdom would you give to a brand new podcaster that's just getting started? Maybe they're in the stages of just planning and thinking, is this the right move for me? Should I do this? Should I just like make it happen? What piece of advice would you give to them?
I think it goes back to what we were saying. You really do not have to be perfect at it. And don't let that thought of perfectionism stop you from going. It's a learning process. I mean, I have learned so much in the past year. I learned so much from not knowing anything about podcasting to going through your course and learning about podcasting to being in a community to doing it by myself. I've learned so much, and I would never have learned the things I've learned if I just didn't do it and take that messy action to move forward. So for anybody out there, and I know, Crystal, you preach this so much, and you're such a great example of just moving forward no matter what. But I just have to back that up and say, yeah, 100%. Just do the dang thing because it's going to be so much fun and you have something to offer the world, right? So I just love it.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That's so good. That was like a mic drop worthy moment. I love that so much. And I could not agree more. But Brittany, like, tell me, because I'm really excited. Y'all, like I said, I have been following Brittany's podcast. I listened to her podcast, and first of all, I have to also give you another shout out because we have another connection. Brittany took so many amazing pictures of my book. So if you ever see any pictures that it has started Binge Worthy podcast and their post, I didn't do that. That is Brittany. Those are her amazing photography skills. So I want to give you that shout out. But I know that you're working on a brand new program. You're launching something new soon. So tell us all about it.
Oh, I'm so, so excited. So I have an amazing program for women who are starting out their businesses and don't know what in the world is going to set them apart to make them stand out from the crowd. You think about anybody in any industry, you feel like, oh my gosh, this industry is oversaturated. Not true. Any industry is available for you to break out in if you know what you're selling, you know what you're serving or how you're serving, you know what you're building upon, and that's your personal brand. So I'm all about personal branding. I have a program coming out in just a couple weeks here called the Brand Builders Bootcamp, and it helps any entrepreneur, not just women, but helps you go through the process of what it's like to build a brand, build it the right way, start fresh so that people can connect with you and you can start working with your ideal clients. So, but it all starts out, I've got a really fun challenge coming up. It actually started this week. So it's all about building your brand in 5 days. It's really easy steps to help you connect with your ideal clients. Free challenge. You can find it over at brittbennion.com/challenge. You get all the details. So come join us. It's really fun. You can see me and we chat live every day on our Facebook group. It's so fun.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So you have to go check that out. We're going to have links in the show notes so you can make sure and go follow Brittany, which by the way, you have to go follow Brittany's Instagram because of course she puts pretty pictures up there of her and everything. You know, we love you so much, but I want to talk about your clients because I will see pictures that you've taken of your clients and I'm thinking of, and I cannot think of her name, the yoga instructor that you have that just has the most vibrant personality and it just exudes from her pictures. And I see it and I'm just like, I wish she was my yoga teacher because she looks like so much fun. So tell us about your Instagram and where people can find you.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, you can find me at Branding by Britt. That's Britt with one T. And I put so many pictures of all of my clients that I've worked with one-on-one. The girl that you're talking about, her name is Bree, and she's a yoga instructor here in the state of Michigan. And she is just as fantastic as those images make her look like. I absolutely love working with her. I've worked with her multiple times, but it's just so fun because uh, just like you said, if I read something, I could say this is important versus if I've got like a podcast and you can hear me say this is important, you can really feel that energy. That's what I really try to capture and teach other people how to capture that of themselves in their own images. Because you should be able to stand out. You should be able to have somebody look at your picture and be like, oh my gosh, if I don't work with that person right now, I just don't know what I'm going to do. And so that's great that you get that from Bree in the pictures. Thank you.
Oh, 100%, 100%. So y'all go listen to Brittany's podcast, go follow her on Instagram and join her challenge. You don't want to miss out on this. I think it's a perfect way to start the new year and have a great plan for your brand set in place. But Brittany, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Crystal. It has been a pleasure.
So what did you think? Oh my gosh, I knew that you would enjoy the conversation about the behind the scenes of her podcast, what it was like for her first year of podcasting. Like I said in the beginning, I'm so proud of Brittany in her journey with podcasting and how she persevered through the hardest year. Oh my gosh. And I just cannot believe the ideas that have come out of her podcast and the different directions that she's been able to pivot and move and adjust and just inspire other people through her show. So I hope that you enjoyed this conversation today. You've got to go sign up for Brittany's challenge, go follow her on Instagram, and check out all the links in the show notes. You're going to find everything we talked about today at crystalprofit.com/episode 217. Y'all, go check out what Brittany's doing. Not only is she a fantastic brand strategist and photographer, but she's also one of the most down-to-earth people I've ever met. And I am so grateful that Brittany has come into my life and that we can call each other friends because she is so much fun to work with. But that's all I have for you today. So like I said, make sure you go check out the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 217. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.